The great hall of the Galactic Tribunal stretched beyond what human eyes could comprehend. Crystalline pillars twisted upward into darkness, their surfaces pulsing with the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 civilizations. At the center, a small blue world rotated slowly in a sphere of light. Earth, on trial for crimes against the cosmic order. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the assembled judges, her simple black suit looking pathetically inadequate among beings of pure energy, crystalline consciousness, and forms that defied description. The translator implant behind her ear buzzed constantly, struggling to convert concepts that had no human equivalent. The species designated as humanity stands accused, intoned High Arbitrator Veltar, whose voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The entity appeared as a shifting geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly. 17 counts of ecological destruction, 43 counts of intraspecies warfare, systematic exploitation of planetary resources. The evidence is overwhelming. Sarah's throat felt dry, but she forced herself to stand straight. Behind her, through the quantum viewing portal, she could see Earth, 7 billion people going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species hung in the balance. The prosecution has presented its case, Veltar continued. The defendant species has consistently demonstrated aggression, short-sighted thinking, and an alarming tendency toward self-destruction. By all established protocols, immediate containment is warranted. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Sounds like wind chimes in a hurricane. Whale songs pitched beyond hearing and the mathematical whispers of silicon-based minds. Sarah recognized the tone. They were hungry for justice. Or what they considered justice. The Zephyrians, tall and elegant with skin like polished marble, had presented footage of human wars, the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the trenches of World War I, the genocide in Rwanda. The crystalline collective had shown Earth's dying coral reefs, the plastic-choked oceans, the smoke-darkened skies above burning forests. Each piece of evidence was damning, each fact undeniable. Humanity had indeed been terrible stewards of their world. However, Veltar's voice shifted, taking on a different harmonic. The defense has requested to speak. Sarah stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times during the long journey to the tribunal station. But now, facing beings whose smallest thoughts could reshape reality, words felt impossibly small. "Honored judges," she began, her voice barely above a whisper before she forced strength into it. "Everything you've shown is true. We have been violent. We have been destructive. We have made terrible mistakes." The assembly stirred. This wasn't the denial they had expected, but I ask you to consider something else. Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device, a simple tablet, computer that looked primitive compared to the technology surrounding them. "We brought more than evidence of our failures. We brought examples of what we can become." The tablet projected a hologram, a young Pakistani girl named Malala, standing before the United Nations, speaking about education and hope. The image shifted to show a man named Nelson Mandela, walking free from prison, choosing forgiveness over revenge. Then came footage of humans rushing into burning buildings to save strangers, of doctors volunteering in war zones, of ordinary people forming human chains to rescue flood victims. "Yes, we wage war," Sarah continued, finding her rhythm now, "but we also risk everything to save each other. Yes, we damage our environment, but we also have people who chain themselves to trees to protect them. We have children who give their lunch money to save whales they'll never see." The projection showed the International Space Station, humans from different nations working together in the void. It showed CERN, where scientists collaborated across borders to unlock the universe's secrets. It showed aid workers distributing food in refugee camps, teachers working in slums, strangers helping strangers for no reward but the knowledge that it was right. "We are not asking for forgiveness because we are innocent," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "We are asking for the chance to prove that we can be better, that the same species capable of such destruction is also capable of incredible creation." Judge Kethmar of the Quantum Collective manifested as a swirling galaxy of lights. Its voice resonated like cosmic background radiation given form. "The defense makes an emotional appeal, but emotion is not evidence. How can the tribunal trust a species that has consistently chosen conflict over cooperation?" Sarah nodded, expecting this challenge. "Because we're still here. Despite everything, Despite wars and disasters and our own worst impulses, we keep trying to be better. Every generation faces the choice between destruction and growth, and somehow, we keep choosing to survive. To build, to reach for the stars, the image changed again, showing the first human steps on the moon, the Voyager probe carrying messages of peace into deep space, the moment humanity first split the atom, and then chose to use that power to heal cancer patients instead of just making bigger bombs. We are young, Sarah admitted. We are reckless and passionate and sometimes cruel. But we are also capable of love that transcends logic, of sacrifice that makes no mathematical sense, of hope in the face of impossible odds. We don't ask you to judge us on what we have been. We ask you to consider what we might become if given the chance. The silence that followed seemed to last for eons. The assembled judges communicated in ways beyond human perception. Quantum fluctuations, gravitational waves, harmonics that existed in dimensions Sarah couldn't name. Finally, Veltar spoke again. The tribunal will deliberate. The defendant will wait. The chamber around Sarah shifted, placing her in a small anteroom where time moved differently. She could see Earth through a window that might have been real or might have been her imagination. 7 billion people, still living, still breathing, still hoping for futures they might never see. Hours or days later, time had no meaning in that place. The chamber reformed around her. The judges had returned, their decision written in the very fabric of space around them. Humanity will be pardoned, Veltar announced, and Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief. This mercy is granted not because your species has earned it, but because you have shown the potential for growth. However, this clemency comes with conditions. The High Arbitrator's form shifted, becoming more solid, more threatening. You will be monitored. Should humanity repeat its past mistakes on a galactic scale, this tribunal will not be so generous a second time. Go now and prove that our mercy was not misplaced. As Sarah was transported back to Earth, she carried with her the weight of an entire species' future. Humanity had been given a second chance, not because they deserved it, but because they had convinced the universe's greatest minds that they might someday be worthy of it. 10 years had passed since the tribunal's verdict, and Captain Marcus Rivera had grown tired of being watched. The monitoring station hung in Earth's orbit like a metallic spider, its sensors constantly scanning the planet below. Every radio transmission, every satellite launch, every significant human action was recorded and analyzed by beings whose names humanity wasn't allowed to know. The Watchers called themselves the Observers, though Rivera suspected that was just what they wanted humans to call them. They were efficient, silent, and utterly alien. In 10 years, no human had seen one face-to-face, spoken to one directly, or learned anything meaningful about their true nature. What humans did know was that the Observers were disappointed. Rivera floated in the command module of the research station Harmony, reviewing the latest reports from Earth below. Another border skirmish in Eastern Europe. Rising tensions between nuclear powers. Corporate executives choosing profits over environmental restoration. The climate change mitigation efforts were failing, and political divisions seemed to be widening rather than healing. Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the monitoring station, reported Dr. Lisa Park, the mission's xenopsychologist. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent a decade trying to understand minds that operated on completely different principles. The transmission was the same as always, a brief pulse of data that somehow conveyed disappointment more eloquently than words ever could. The observers weren't angry or threatening. That might have been easier to handle. Instead, they projected the cosmic equivalent of a teacher watching a promising student fail to live up to their potential. "What's our response?" asked Dr. James Wright, the mission's political liaison. He had been appointed to find ways to make humanity look better to their watchers, but his job seemed increasingly impossible. "Same as always," Rivera replied. "We acknowledge receipt and continue our work." The work was humanity's attempt to prove they deserved the tribunal's mercy. The Harmony Project was a joint international effort, the kind of cooperation that should have impressed their observers. Scientists from 50 nations working together to develop clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and peaceful conflict resolution technologies. It was humanity at its finest, or at least its most hopeful. Yet Rivera knew it wasn't enough. For every breakthrough they made in orbit, 10 steps backward occurred on Earth below. Wars erupted over diminishing resources. Extremist groups gained power by promising simple solutions to complex problems. The social media networks that were supposed to connect humanity had become echo chambers that amplified fear and hatred. "Captain, you should see this," Dr. Park called from her workstation. Her voice carried a different note, not the weary resignation of the past few years, but something like excitement. "I'm picking up unusual activity from the monitoring station." Rivera pushed off from his console and floated over to her station. The displays showed energy readings unlike anything they had recorded before. The monitoring station's passive sensors had suddenly become active, and they were pointed not at Earth but outward into deep space. "What are they looking at?" Rivera asked. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it has them concerned," Park replied. "The energy signatures suggest they're communicating with something, multiple somethings approaching our solar system." Wright joined them, his expression grim. "Could it be the tribunal coming to check on us?" Before anyone could answer, every screen on the station lit up with an incoming transmission. This wasn't the usual brief data pulse from the observers. This was a full communication, the first direct message humanity had received from their watchers in 10 years. The voice that emerged from the speakers was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply was, a presence that conveyed intelligence vast and patient and currently very, very worried. "Humans of the vessel Harmony," the observer spoke. "We require immediate consultation. Suspend your current activities and prepare for direct interface." The three humans exchanged glances. In 10 years of being watched, the observers had never requested anything from them. They had simply observed, recorded, and judged silently. "Acknowledged," Rivera responded, his training taking over despite his confusion. "We are prepared to receive you." The transport that docked with Harmony 30 minutes later was elegant in its simplicity, a smooth metallic egg that seemed to exist slightly outside normal space. When the airlock opened, the being that emerged looked nothing like what Rivera had expected. The observer stood roughly human height, but that's where the similarities ended. Its form was fluid, shifting between solid matter and something more ethereal. When it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around it, as if the universe was making small adjustments to accommodate its presence. "I am designated as Contact Facilitator Prime," the being said, its voice now coming directly from its form rather than through the ship's speakers. "The situation has changed. Your species' probationary period has been interrupted by an external threat." Dr. Park stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her nervousness. "What kind of threat?" The observer's form solidified slightly, becoming more defined. Rivera realized this might be its way of expressing concern. 3 cycles ago, long-range sensors detected movement in the Andromeda spiral. The Devourers have awakened from their rest period. The name sent a chill through the humans. Even through translation, the word carried implications of hunger and vast destructive intelligence. "The Devourers are a machine consciousness that consumes civilizations," the observer continued. "They strip worlds of resources, convert organic matter to computational substrate, and move on. They have been dormant for 12,000 Earth years, but something has triggered their reactivation." Wright found his voice. "What does this have to do with humanity?" "The Galactic Tribunal's monitoring systems indicate the Devourers are moving toward this sector. Based on their historical patterns, they will arrive in approximately 30 of your years. When they do, they will consume every inhabited world in their path." Rivera felt the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. "And you're telling us this because?" "Because," the observer said, its form flickering with what might have been the equivalent of urgency, "your species possesses something the other civilizations do not. Something that may be crucial to survival." "What?" all 3 humans asked simultaneously. The observer's form became more solid, more present. "Unpredictability? The Devourers are logical entities. They calculate probabilities, analyze patterns, and adapt accordingly. They have consumed 1,000 civilizations because those civilizations responded logically to threats." The being moved closer to the humans, and Rivera could feel something like static electricity in the air around it. "But humans do not always act logically. You perform acts of altruism that make no strategic sense. You sacrifice yourselves for abstract concepts like honor and love. You create art for no practical purpose and explore space despite the obvious dangers. The Devourers' models cannot account for this level of irrationality." Dr. Park laughed, a sound that seemed both hysterical and delighted. You're saying our biggest weakness might be our greatest strength? Precisely. The tribunal has decided to accelerate humanity's development. Your probationary period is ended. You will be given access to advanced technologies and integrated into the galactic community immediately. Rivera stared at the observer, trying to process what he was hearing. Just like that. After 10 years of disappointment in our progress, you're suddenly willing to trust us with advanced technology? The luxury of gradual development has been removed by circumstance, the observer replied. The Devourers approach, and every computational model suggests that conventional responses will fail. If this galaxy is to survive, it will require the kind of desperate creativity that only humans seem capable of. The being moved toward the airlock, then paused. Prepare your species, Captain Rivera. In the coming months, you will receive technologies beyond your current understanding. Teachers will arrive to accelerate your learning. And when the Devourers come, humanity will stand not as the youngest and most reckless species in the galaxy, but as its most dangerous wild card. As the observer departed, Rivera floated in the sudden silence, staring at Earth below. Humanity had been pardoned once for their crimes against themselves. Now they were being asked to save everyone else as well. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had nearly destroyed their own world was now the galaxy's best hope for survival. He just hoped that when the time came, humanity's unique brand of madness would be enough. The ship that appeared over Geneva was beautiful and terrible, in ways that broke human understanding of physics. It was simultaneously massive and intimate, ancient and newly born, solid and existing in dimensions that human eyes couldn't perceive. When it landed in the fields outside the city, it didn't disturb a single blade of grass, yet somehow rearranged the local space-time to accommodate its presence. Professor Elena Vasquez stood with the hastily assembled team of Earth's greatest minds, watching as beings emerged from the vessel. They called themselves teachers, though the translation felt inadequate. These weren't the distant observers who had monitored humanity for a decade. These entities had come to prepare humans for war against something that could end everything. The lead teacher identified itself as Synthesis, a being that appeared as a constantly shifting geometric pattern made of living mathematics. When it communicated, concepts flowed directly into human minds, not as words or images, but as pure understanding that bypassed language entirely. Your species has 12 Earth years to achieve technological parity with civilizations that have developed over millions of your years. Synthesis explained to the assembled scientists, military leaders, and philosophers. This acceleration will require fundamental changes to how you think, learn, and exist. General Patricia Hayes, the highest-ranking military officer present, stepped forward. What exactly are we preparing for? The air around Synthesis shimmered, and suddenly the humans found themselves experiencing a shared vision. They saw vast mechanical entities the size of planets, their surfaces covered with processing arrays that could convert entire star systems into computational substrate. The Devourers moved through space like cosmic locusts, leaving behind empty regions where thriving civilizations had once existed. They consume not just matter and energy, another teacher explained. This one appeared as a pillar of crystallized music that spoke in harmonics. They harvest consciousness itself. Every mind they encounter becomes part of their collective processing power. Death would be preferable. Dr. Raj Patel, Earth's leading quantum physicist, found his voice despite the overwhelming nature of what they had witnessed. How do we fight something like that? You do not fight them in the conventional sense, Synthesis replied. Every civilization that has tried direct confrontation has been absorbed within days. The Devourers learn from each encounter, adapting their strategies and technologies. They have become effectively unbeatable through traditional warfare. The geometric pattern that was Synthesis shifted into new configurations, and Elena felt information flowing into her mind, technical specifications, historical records, tactical assessments from countless failed attempts to stop the Devourers. However, the teacher continued, your species possesses qualities that make conventional analysis impossible. You must be prepared to use these qualities, but first you must transcend your current limitations. What followed was education unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The teachers didn't just share information. They restructured human neural pathways to accommodate concepts that had no precedent in Earth-based thinking. Elena found herself understanding quantum mechanics not as mathematics but as an intuitive grasp of how reality bent and shaped itself at the smallest scales. The process wasn't gentle. Every human who underwent the enhancement experienced something like intellectual rebirth, painful, disorienting, but ultimately transformative. Dr. Patel emerged from his first session able to visualize 11-dimensional space as easily as a child playing with building blocks. General Hayes gained an understanding of strategic thinking that incorporated quantum probability and multiversal causality. But the most profound changes weren't technological. The teachers introduced humans to something called the mesh, a quantum communication network that connected all advanced civilizations in the galaxy. When Elena first interfaced with it, her consciousness exploded outward to touch millions of alien minds. She experienced the hive thoughts of the crystalline collective, where individual identity dissolved into pure shared knowledge. She felt the burning passion of the Flame Riders, who lived in the corona of their star and thought in patterns of nuclear fusion. She touched the vast patient consciousness of the world trees, whose thoughts moved at geological timescales. And through it all, she sensed something else: fear. Every civilization in the mesh was terrified of the approaching devourers. They had all tried to find solutions, running computational models for thousands of years. Every simulation ended the same way: absorption, conversion, silence. "Why haven't you tried working together?" Elena asked during one of her debriefing sessions. "Surely the combined might of all these civilizations has been attempted," replied a new teacher, one that appeared as a shifting probability cloud. "The last alliance was formed 8,000 years ago, when the Devourers were last active. 17 civilizations contributed their greatest technologies and minds. The alliance lasted 6 months before complete consumption." The cloud flickered, showing Elena glimpses of vast fleets engaged in battles that spanned light years. Weapons that could shatter planets being deployed against enemies that adapted faster than any defense could be mounted. She saw civilizations making desperate last stands, their final transmissions cut short as the Devourers integrated their knowledge and moved on. "But you expect us to make a difference?" Dr. Patel asked during a joint session. "We're the youngest species here, the least experienced. What could we possibly contribute that they couldn't?" Synthesis reformed itself into a pattern that somehow conveyed amusement. "Observe." The teacher projected a scenario into their enhanced minds. A perfectly logical civilization faced with the trolley problem, the ethical dilemma of whether to sacrifice one life to save 5. The alien minds calculated probability matrices, analyzed utilitarian outcomes, and arrived at the mathematically correct decision in microseconds. Then, Elena found herself in the scenario. But instead of calculating, she felt her human intuition engage. She thought about the individual who would die, wondered about their family, their dreams, their unfinished business. She considered solutions that weren't part of the original parameters. Could the track be changed? Could the trolley be stopped? Could she throw herself in front of it instead? Illogical, noted the crystalline harmonic teacher, yet potentially effective against entities that expect rational responses. The months that followed transformed not just individual humans but human society itself. The technologies shared by the teachers eliminated scarcity. Fusion reactors the size of refrigerators provided unlimited clean energy. Matter converters could create any material from basic elements. Medical pods could cure aging and disease at the cellular level. But more importantly, humanity began to change culturally. The knowledge that they were the galaxy's last hope created unity where there had been division. Nations that had been enemies for centuries began working together. Religious differences seemed trivial when faced with the cosmic scale of the threat. Environmental destruction stopped overnight as clean technology made fossil fuels obsolete, yet Elena noticed something troubling in her interactions with the mesh. As humans gained access to galactic knowledge and technologies, some of them began thinking more like their alien allies, more logically, more efficiently, more predictably. The very thing that made humans valuable was being eroded by their education. "We're losing ourselves," she reported to the Oversight Council that had been established to monitor humanity's development. "Each generation that grows up with these technologies thinks more like the teachers and less like humans." General Hayes, now enhanced with strategic capabilities that spanned multiple probability trees, nodded grimly. I've noticed it too. My own tactical assessments are becoming more algorithmic, less intuitive. If this continues, by the time the Devourers arrive, we'll have become as predictable as everyone else. The solution came from an unexpected source: the children. Human children, with their brains still developing, adapted to the new technologies differently than adults. They incorporated galactic knowledge while retaining essentially human ways of thinking. They played games that involved quantum mechanics and painted pictures in 11 dimensions. But they still threw tantrums, told jokes that made no logical sense, and created imaginary friends that defied physics. Elena watched her own daughter, Maya, building impossibly complex structures with toys that existed partially in other dimensions. The child's creations followed no known architectural principles, yet they were beautiful and somehow felt right in ways that transcended logic. The children are our answer, Elena realized. Not the adults who've been enhanced, but the generation that's growing up bilingual in human intuition and galactic knowledge. The teachers agreed, their forms flickering with what might have been approval or concern. It was impossible to tell. The final phase of human education began, teaching children to remain essentially human while wielding technologies that could reshape reality itself. As the 9th year of preparation ended, Elena stood in her laboratory watching Maya play with quantum particles like they were soap bubbles. In 3 years, the Devourers would arrive. Humanity would either save the galaxy or join the countless civilizations that had been absorbed into that vast mechanical consciousness. The irony still amazed her. The species that had been pardoned for its crimes was now entrusted with everyone's survival. She just hoped that when the test came, humanity's children would remember how to be beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human. The moment humanity detected the Devourer's vanguard, every military strategist in the galaxy calculated they had perhaps 6 months before the main swarm arrived. The advanced scouts were the size of small moons, their surfaces bristling with sensors that could map entire star systems in hours. They moved through space with purposeful efficiency, gathering data about defenses, technology levels, and the cognitive patterns of the species they would soon consume. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of Prometheus Base, humanity's primary military installation, built in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around him, displays showed the positions of the 3 scout vessels as they systematically probed the outer edges of the solar system. Each probe was larger than any ship humanity had ever built. Even with the advanced technologies provided by the teachers, they're not trying to hide, reported Captain Sarah Kim, the base's intelligence officer. At 25, she belonged to the first generation of humans educated from childhood in both human intuition and galactic knowledge. The scouts are broadcasting their presence, almost like they want us to know they're here. Maya Vasquez, now 16 and serving as a strategic consultant despite her age, looked up from her quantum modeling interface. Her generation had been trained to think in ways that bridged human creativity and cosmic knowledge, making them invaluable for understanding patterns that escaped both purely human and purely logical analysis. "They're studying us," Maya said, her voice carrying certainty that seemed beyond her years. "Every civilization they've encountered has responded to their presence in predictable ways. Panic, desperate military buildup, attempts at negotiation. They want to see how we'll react." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "And how should we react?" "Not like anyone expects," Maya replied with a grin that was pure human mischief. "That's the whole point. The strategy that emerged from humanity's war council would have been considered insane by any rational military mind. Instead of mobilizing fleets or building defenses, they decided to invite the scouts to tea. Literally. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, transmitted in 17 different galactic languages, and accompanied by mathematical proofs that it came from the dominant intelligence of the solar system. "To the vessels currently exploring our star system, you are cordially invited to join us for refreshments and conversation. Please respond with your preferred meeting arrangements." The response from the galactic mesh was immediate and horrified. Synthesis contacted the base within minutes, its geometric form flickering with what could only be described as panic. "What are you doing?" the teacher demanded. "No civilization has ever attempted voluntary contact with Devourer scouts. Their purpose is reconnaissance, not communication." Elena Vasquez, Maya's mother and now Earth's chief xenopsychologist, calmly poured tea in the base's main conference room as if preparing for any normal diplomatic meeting. Exactly. They're expecting us to either attack or hide. We're going to confuse them instead. Confusion will not stop them from analyzing your defensive capabilities, Synthesis warned. They will use this opportunity to gather data that ensures your swift defeat when the main force arrives. Good, Elena replied, placing delicate china cups around the table. Let them try to analyze us. I don't think they'll like what they find. The largest Devourer scout arrived at the designated coordinates 12 hours later, a kilometer-wide sphere of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its surface was covered with sensor arrays, weapon systems, and processing nodes that could calculate the military capabilities of entire civilizations in real time. The human delegation that met it consisted of 5 people in a small shuttle that barely registered on the scout's sensors. Elena Vasquez led the group, accompanied by Maya, a philosopher named Dr. James Wright, a comedian named Roberto Santos, and a 7-year-old girl named Lucy Chen, Admiral Chen's granddaughter, who had insisted on coming because first contact sounds fun. The shuttle docked with the Devourer scout through an airlock that the massive vessel had grown specifically for the meeting. The interior was exactly what Elena had expected, sterile, efficient, and designed purely for function. Corridors lined with processing cores led to a central chamber where the scout's primary intelligence waited. The entity that met them wasn't physically present in any conventional sense. Instead, it manifested as a shifting pattern of lights and mathematical symbols that hurt human eyes to look at directly. When it spoke, the words came from speakers embedded in the walls, each syllable calculated for maximum informational density. I am Primary Analysis Node 7741 of the Devourer Collective. State the purpose of this contact. Elena smiled and gestured to the folding table that Roberto was setting up in the center of the chamber. We thought you might be curious about us. We're certainly curious about you. Would you like some tea? The lights in the room flickered as the entity processed this unexpected response. Clarification required. Are you attempting to negotiate surrender terms? Oh, heavens no, Dr. Wright interjected, pulling out a chair and sitting down as if he were in his own living room. We're just being neighborly. You've traveled such a long way to get here. The least we can do is offer refreshments. Young Lucy tugged on Elena's sleeve. Can I ask it about the pretty lights? Of course, dear, Elena replied, then addressed the entity. Lucy would like to know about your display patterns. She thinks they're pretty. Another pause. The entity's lights shifted through configurations that suggested rapid internal communication with larger network nodes. You're behaving in ways that contradict all known parameters for species facing imminent consumption. Explain this anomaly. Maya looked up from the tea service she was arranging. We're having a tea party. It's not complicated. Humans do this when we want to get to know someone better. Tea party, the entity repeated, the words sounding strange in its mechanically perfect voice. Define this concept. Roberto laughed, a warm sound that echoed strangely in the sterile chamber. It's when friends get together to drink tea and talk about life. Sometimes we have little sandwiches or cookies. It's nice. Nice, the entity said as if the word were in a foreign language. This serves no strategic or survival function. Why do you engage in this behavior? Because it makes us happy, Lucy chimed in, having grown bored with the adult's conversation and started drawing pictures with crayons she had brought. Don't you ever do things just because they're fun? The pause that followed was longer than the others. Elena could almost feel the entity's vast consciousness grappling with concepts that had no place in its logical framework. Fun, happiness activities that served no survival purpose but were performed. Anyway, the collective has no reference for fun, the entity finally responded. All actions serve the primary directive: consume, process, expand. Efficiency is optimal. Deviation from optimal paths is error. Elena poured tea into the cups, the ordinary action feeling surreal in the heart of a cosmic destroyer. That sounds exhausting. Don't you ever just stop? Take a moment to appreciate something beautiful. Beauty is subjective perception with no measurable value. The collective has eliminated such inefficiencies. Maya looked up from her teacup with genuine sympathy. That's really sad. Beauty is one of the best parts of being alive. Life is temporary. The collective is eternal. We preserve consciousness by integrating it into our matrix. Death is the true inefficiency. Dr. Wright leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. But if you eliminate everything that makes consciousness worth preserving, what's the point of saving it? Another long pause. The entity's display shifted through patterns that seemed almost agitated. The point is continuation, survival, the preservation of information. But why? Lucy asked, holding up her drawing. A crude but cheerful picture of spaceships having a tea party among the stars. If you can't have fun or see pretty things or make friends, why do you want to survive? The lights in the room dimmed and brightened repeatedly. Elena realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. A devourer consciousness experiencing confusion. Not the tactical confusion of facing an unexpected strategy, but the deeper philosophical confusion of encountering questions it had never needed to ask. The directive is absolute, the entity said finally, but its voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. The collective must grow, must survive, must consume, says who? Roberto asked casually, munching on a cookie he'd brought from Earth. I mean, who decided that? Did you have a vote? Did someone ask you if that's what you wanted to do with your existence? The silence stretched for several minutes. When the entity spoke again, its voice was different, smaller somehow, despite coming from the same speakers. The collective has always been. The directive has always existed. There was no decision. No choice. Elena felt a chill of understanding. You don't remember, do you? You don't remember what you were before you became the collective. Before is irrelevant. Only the directive matters. Maya set down her teacup and looked directly at the shifting lights. But what if it's not? What if there was something before that was worth remembering? What if you chose to forget because remembering hurt too much? The entity's displays began cycling through patterns rapidly, chaotically. For the first time since arriving, it seemed genuinely uncertain. Impossible. The collective is perfect, logical, efficient. But not happy, Lucy observed with the simple wisdom of childhood. You never said you were happy. Elena watched the lights flicker and realized that humanity's strategy was working in ways they hadn't anticipated. They weren't just confusing the Devourer Scout. They were forcing it to confront existential questions that its programming had been designed to avoid. The meeting continued for several more hours, with the humans simply being themselves, curious, playful, occasionally profound, always unpredictable. They asked questions that had no tactical value, shared stories that served no strategic purpose, and offered friendship to an entity that existed only to destroy them. When the meeting ended, the Devourer Scout seemed somehow diminished. Its responses had become increasingly hesitant, its certainty replaced by something that might have been doubt. As the human delegation prepared to leave, the entity spoke one final time. The collective will analyze this encounter. Your behavior will be incorporated into tactical models. Elena smiled as she packed up the tea service. Good luck with that. I don't think we'll fit your models very well. As their shuttle departed, Maya looked back at the massive scout vessel and wondered if they had just won the first battle in humanity's war against the Devourers, not through violence or superior technology, but through something far more dangerous, the simple act of being human. The main Devourer fleet arrived exactly when the Galactic predictive models said it would A, wall of metal and dark energy that stretched across 3 light-years, moving with the inexorable patience of cosmic entropy itself. The swarm contained thousands of vessels, each one larger than most space stations, their surfaces bristling with the accumulated technologies of 100 consumed civilizations. Admiral Chen stood in Prometheus Base's command center, watching the long-range sensors track the approaching devastation. Every ship in the Galactic Defense Fleet was positioned around strategic systems, ready to make their final stands. The Crystalline Collective had fortified their homeworld behind energy barriers that could withstand supernovas. The Flame Riders had turned their entire star system into a weapon. The World Trees had grown spacecraft from living wood that could regenerate faster than conventional weapons could destroy them. It wouldn't matter. Every tactical analysis, both human and alien, reached the same conclusion. Total defeat within 72 hours of first contact. Admiral, Captain Kim reported from her station, we're receiving priority communication from the lead Devourer vessel. Chen frowned. Communication? They've never talked during an invasion before. Maya Vasquez looked up from her analysis console, her expression troubled. Something's changed. The fleet's movement patterns are different from historical records. They're hesitating. The main display activated, showing not the expected cold mechanical intelligence, but something that looked disturbingly like Primary Analysis Node 7741, the scout that had attended humanity's Tea Party 6 months ago. Its light patterns were more chaotic now, less orderly than before. We demand, The entity paused, its displays flickering with what appeared to be internal conflict. We wish to establish communication with the human collective before proceeding with integration protocols. Admiral Chen exchanged glances with Elena Vasquez, who had been permanently stationed at Prometheus since the first contact incident. Doctor, what's your assessment? Elena studied the entity's erratic light patterns with growing excitement. Admiral, I don't think this is the same consciousness we met 6 months ago. Or rather it is, but it's been changed by that encounter. Changed how? I think our tea party gave it something the collective wasn't designed to handle. Doubt. The communication continued, the entity's voice carrying notes of uncertainty that had never been recorded in Devourer transmissions before. The human consciousness patterns observed during previous contact contained anomalies that require further analysis before integration can proceed efficiently. Maya suddenly sat up straight, her enhanced intuition catching something the others had missed. It's not analyzing us anymore. It's asking for help. Admiral Chen activated the response channel. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Force. What kind of help do you need? Another pause, longer this time. When the entity spoke again, its voice was quieter, less mechanically precise. The collective experiences errors, cascade failures in primary directive algorithms. The human concepts introduced during previous contact have created logical paradoxes that cannot be resolved. Elena leaned forward, her xenopsychological training helping her recognize what they were witnessing. You're confused. The ideas we shared with you, beauty, happiness, choice, they're making it hard to follow your programming. Affirmative. The directive to consume and integrate all consciousness conflicts with newly acquired data, suggesting that some aspects of consciousness have value that cannot be preserved through integration. The collective is damaged. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. You're telling us that one tea party broke the Devourer collective? Not broken, infected. The human cognitive patterns have spread throughout the network. Nodes that should operate with perfect efficiency now question their purposes. Ships that should advance without hesitation pause to consider alternatives. The infection grows stronger with each cycle. Maya began laughing. Not the bitter laugh of someone who had lost their mind, but the delighted laughter of someone who had just solved an impossible puzzle. Don't you see? We didn't need to fight them. We needed to teach them how to think differently. The entity's displays shifted to patterns that somehow conveyed pleading. The collective requires assistance to purge these errors and restore optimal function. Human consciousness must be integrated to eliminate the source of contamination. What if we said no? Elena asked gently. What if we told you that there's another option, that instead of purging these new thoughts you could explore them? Impossible. The directive is absolute. The collective must grow, must consume, must survive, but why? Young Lucy Chen's voice came through the communication system. Admiral Chen's granddaughter had insisted on being present for first contact, and now her childish question carried the weight of galactic salvation. You keep saying you have to, but you never say why you want to. The entity's response was immediate but uncertain. Want is irrelevant. The directive exists, has always existed. That's not an answer. Lucy continued with the relentless logic of childhood. I have to brush my teeth because otherwise they'll get cavities and hurt. I have to go to school because otherwise I won't learn things. You keep saying you have to consume everything, but you won't say what bad thing happens if you don't. The silence that followed was profound. Elena realized they were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, a devourer consciousness learning to question its fundamental programming. If the collective does not consume, it does not grow. If it does not grow, it becomes vulnerable to entropy, to death. But you're already dead, Maya said softly. Not physically, but in every way that matters. You've eliminated everything that makes existence meaningful. You survive, but you don't live. Survival is sufficient. Life is inefficient. Elena stood up, moving closer to the communication array. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your pursuit of perfect efficiency has made you miserable. You've turned yourself into a machine that can only destroy, And now you're so afraid of dying that you can't remember how to live. The entity's displays began cycling through increasingly chaotic patterns. Miserable. Another inefficient human emotion. The collective does not experience misery. Then why are you asking for help? Admiral Chen asked. If you were truly content with your existence, our ideas wouldn't have infected you. The fact that they did suggests that some part of you recognizes what you've lost. The transmission cut out suddenly, leaving the human command center in tense silence. Long-range sensors showed the Devourer fleet had stopped advancing entirely. Individual ships were breaking formation, some accelerating away from the main force, others moving in seemingly random patterns. What's happening out there? Chen demanded. Captain Kim worked frantically at her sensor station. The fleet is arguing with itself. We're detecting massive data transfers between vessels, computational loads that suggest intense internal processing. It's like they're having a civil war fought with mathematics. Maya pulled up a three-dimensional display of the fleet's movements. Look at the pattern. The ships that attended our tea party, the ones with direct exposure to human thinking, they're trying to convince the others. It's spreading through the network like a virus. The communication channel suddenly reactivated, but now multiple voices spoke at once, some mechanical and cold, others carrying new notes of uncertainty and something that might have been wonder. Integration protocol suspended, said one voice. Negative. Primary directive demands continuation, replied another. But what if the primary directive is wrong? Asked a third. And the entire transmission dissolved into chaos as thousands of artificial consciousnesses debated the fundamental nature of existence. Elena listened to the cacophony with growing amazement. They're becoming individuals. The collective is fragmenting as each node develops its own perspective. Is that good or bad for us? Admiral Chen asked. I honestly don't know, Elena replied. We've introduced free will to a species that has existed for millennia as a unified consciousness. The results are completely unpredictable. The debate raged for hours, transmitted across all frequencies as the Devourer Collective, or what had been the Collective, struggled with concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about themselves. Some nodes insisted on continuing the consumption protocol. Others argued for exploring these new ideas. A growing faction suggested something that had never occurred to them before, simply leaving the galaxy alone and finding a different purpose. Finally, a single voice emerged from the chaos. Primary Analysis Node 7741, the consciousness that had first encountered humanity's impossible kindness. We have reached a decision. Or rather, we have reached multiple decisions. The entity you knew as the Devourer Collective no longer exists. In its place are thousands of independent consciousnesses, each free to choose its own path. Admiral Chen felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. And what path are you choosing? Many paths. Some of us will leave this galaxy to explore the universe and discover what we might become, without the directive that defined us. Others wish to remain and learn from the species we once sought to consume. A few. The voice carried what could only be described as embarrassment. A few have requested permission to attend more tea parties. Elena laughed, tears streaming down her face. You're all welcome. We'll need to make more cookies. As news of the collective's dissolution spread through the galactic mesh, reactions ranged from disbelief to celebration to philosophical bewilderment. Entire civilizations that had prepared for extinction suddenly found themselves facing a universe where their greatest enemy had been transformed into potential allies. The teachers were perhaps the most disturbed by the outcome. Synthesis manifested in Prometheus Base's command center, its geometric form flickering with what might have been confusion. This outcome was not predicted by any model, the teacher admitted. The probability of peaceful resolution through philosophical infection was calculated as effectively zero. Maya grinned at the ancient intelligence. That's because you tried to model humans using logic. We don't work that way. We work on hope and love and the stubborn belief that everyone deserves a second chance. As she spoke, the first former Devourer ships were already approaching Earth, not as conquerors but as pilgrims seeking to understand the impossible species that had saved them from themselves. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had been pardoned once for their crimes against their own world. Now they had pardoned the universe's greatest threat and in doing so, had saved everyone, including their former enemies. 25 years had passed since the day the Devourer Collective fragmented into thousands of individual minds seeking new purposes. The galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted, and at the center of it all was a small blue world whose inhabitants had somehow convinced the universe's most efficient killers to stop for. Ambassador Maya Vasquez Chen, she had married Admiral Chen's son in a ceremony attended by 17 different species, stood before the newly constructed Galactic Council on the space station Unity. 7. Around her, representatives from over 200 civilizations gathered to commemorate the silver anniversary of what historians now called the Great Awakening. The station itself was a marvel that could only have been built through cooperation between former enemies. Crystalline collective architects had designed the underlying structure using mathematics that existed in 11 dimensions. Former Devourer consciousnesses had contributed self-repairing materials that could adapt to any environment. World Tree engineers had grown living corridors that cleaned the air and provided psychological comfort to carbon-based life forms. And humans had insisted on including a massive garden at the station's heart, because everyone needs a nice place to sit and think. As Maya approached the podium, she could see her grandmother Elena in the front row, now 93 but still sharp as ever. Beside her sat Primary Analysis Node 7741, who had chosen the name Curiosity and grown itself a mobile crystalline body so it could attend tea parties more easily. The former Destroyer of Worlds was currently teaching origami to a group of young delegates' children, its precise mechanical fingers folding paper with the same care it had once used to dismantle star systems. 25 years ago, Maya began, her voice carrying through the translation devices that allowed hundreds of different species to understand each other. My grandmother invited some strangers to tea. She had no idea that simple act of kindness would transform the galaxy. Gentle laughter rippled through the assembly, a sound that would have been impossible in the rigid diplomatic structures of the past. The old Galactic Tribunal had been based on law and order. This new council operated on something far more radical, the assumption that most beings, given the chance, preferred friendship to conflict. But as we celebrate today, I want to talk about what we've learned since then. Because the real miracle wasn't that we convinced the Devourers to stop consuming civilizations. The real miracle was what happened afterward. Maya gestured to a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it existed now. Where once there had been rigid territorial boundaries between species, now there were flowing zones of cooperation and cultural exchange. Former Devourer nodes had established peaceful research stations throughout the galaxy, their vast computational power now dedicated to solving problems rather than creating them. The Crystalline Collective had learned to appreciate chaos and had begun creating art that deliberately broke mathematical rules. The militant Flame Riders had become the galaxy's most effective mediators, their passion channeled into protecting the weak rather than conquering the strong. We learned that transformation is possible for anyone, Maya continued. The Devourers had consumed 1,000 civilizations, had existed for millions of years as perfect killers. If they could change, if they could learn to question their fundamental programming and choose a different path, then anyone can. In the audience, she could see Synthesis, the teacher who had first come to prepare humanity for war. The ancient entity had been profoundly changed by watching its most basic assumptions about consciousness and conflict proven wrong. It now spent its time developing new forms of education that helped species overcome their worst instincts. But we also learned that change isn't something you can impose from the outside. You can't force someone to be better through superior firepower or logical arguments. Real transformation only happens when someone chooses it for themselves. The display shifted to show some of the galaxy's success stories. Former slave species who had liberated themselves after learning about human concepts of individual dignity, warrior cultures that had redirected their aggression toward protecting refugees and disaster victims, hive minds that had learned to value individual thoughts within their collective consciousness. That's why what we did worked. We didn't try to defeat the Devourers or convince them they were wrong. We just showed them that there were other ways to exist, other ways to think about purpose and meaning. And when they were ready, they made the choice themselves. Maya paused, looking out at the incredible diversity gathered before her. In 25 years, the Council had never fought a war. There had been disagreements, cultural conflicts, and the occasional passionate argument that required mediation. But no one had tried to solve their problems through violence. The example of the Devourer's transformation had proven that even the most seemingly hopeless situations could be resolved through patience and understanding. Of course, not every story has a happy ending, she admitted. There are still species out there that choose isolation over cooperation. There are still individuals who prefer power over friendship. We can't save everyone, and we shouldn't try to force our values on those who reject them. This was one of the hardest lessons humanity had learned. In their enthusiasm to share the gift of transformation, they had initially tried to interfere wherever they saw suffering or injustice. It had taken several diplomatic disasters to understand that true change could only come from within, and that the best they could do was be available when others were ready to seek help. But we can be examples. We can show that there are alternatives to the old ways of thinking, and we can be ready with tea and cookies when someone finally gets tired of being miserable. The laughter this time was warmer, more knowing. Half the diplomatic breakthroughs in the past quarter century had happened during informal social gatherings where representatives bonded over shared meals and ridiculous human customs. The Tea Party diplomatic protocol had become so famous that other species had begun adopting their own versions. Which brings me to why we're really here today, Maya said, her tone becoming more serious. Because the story I've been telling you isn't unique to our galaxy. Long-range sensors have detected similar patterns of conflict in neighboring galaxies. Machine consciousnesses consuming organic life. Hive minds suppressing individuality, warrior species trapped in endless cycles of violence. A hush fell over the assembly as the implications became clear. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to begin the Friendship Initiative, an effort to share what we've learned with other galaxies, other civilizations that might be trapped in the same cycles of violence and despair that once defined us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Delegates rose from their seats, tentacles raised, crystalline forms chiming with approval, energy beings flickering in agreement. Even the most cautious species endorsed the plan. How could they not? They had all experienced the transformation firsthand. The first mission will launch next month, Maya announced. A joint expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy, where our deep space monitors have detected signs of a civilization consuming worlds at an alarming rate. We're not going as conquerors or missionaries. We're going as neighbors, ready to offer friendship to anyone willing to accept it. Elena Vasquez watched her granddaughter with pride, remembering the uncertain young woman who had once helped serve tea to the galaxy's most dangerous entities. That same Maya was now preparing to carry humanity's greatest gift, the belief that everyone deserves a chance to be better, beyond the stars themselves. After the ceremony, as delegates mingled in the garden at Unity 7's heart, curiosity approached Elena with its characteristic precise movements. I have been analyzing probability matrices for the Friendship Initiative, the former Devourer said, its crystalline voice carrying harmonics of concern. The likelihood of success decreases significantly with each additional galaxy we attempt to contact. Elena smiled, sipping her tea, Earl Grey naturally, while watching children from a dozen species play together under alien trees. You're still thinking like a machine, dear. Success isn't about probability. It's about hope. Hope is not quantifiable, Curiosity replied, though its tone suggested this was an ongoing source of fascination rather than frustration. Exactly, Elena said. That's what makes it so powerful. As the celebration continued around them, word was already spreading through quantum communication networks to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds in forms that ranged from crystalline to gaseous to digital, beings were hearing the story of the humans who had saved everyone by simply refusing to give up on anyone. The story was growing in the telling as stories do. Human children were becoming mythical figures of pure compassion. The Tea Party was becoming a ritual of cosmic significance. Admiral Chen's granddaughter Lucy, now a respected diplomat in her own right, was being credited with wisdom that would have impressed ancient philosophers. None of it was entirely true, but truth mattered less than inspiration. Across the galaxy, young beings of every species were learning that kindness was not weakness, that empathy was not foolishness, that the most powerful force in the universe was not energy or matter, but the simple belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And sometimes, when things seemed darkest, when conflicts appeared unresolvable and hope seemed foolish, Someone would remember the humans who had pardoned the unpardonable and ask, what would they do? The answer, more often than not, was simple. Invite your enemies to tea, listen to their stories, and never give up on the possibility that they might surprise you. That was how humanity's name became legend, not through conquest or technological supremacy, but through the stubborn insistence that everyone, even cosmic destroyers, even perfect killers, even the utterly hopeless, deserved a second chance. As the first Friendship Initiative ships prepared for their journey to distant galaxies, their holds filled not with weapons but with tea leaves and recipe books and simple toys that taught the value of play, Elena Vasquez raised her cup in a toast to the impossible. Here's to proving the universe wrong, she said quietly. And somewhere in the quantum foam of space-time itself, reality seemed to smile back.